Joining me now, as he does each and every week, is Sky News Australia's media watchdog, columnist, Gerard Henderson. Thank you so much for joining us here. Now, another great topic. You're so brilliant at fighting these. Zali Steggall. She's done an interview with Sally Sarah, who we talk about a lot on this show. Now, let's have a quick listen.
Climate-focused independents re-elected to Parliament say the next big challenge is Labor setting its 2035 emissions target, which it didn't do before the election. The independent member for Warringah, Zali Steggall, is my guest. Zali Steggall, welcome back to Breakfast.
Thank you. Good morning.
This week you've renewed your calls for the government to set a target of a minimum of 75% cut to emissions by 2035. Why that number?
Well, because we have to remember the purpose of the Paris Agreement is actually to keep temperatures within livable band range. So we minimise the impact of climate risk, of catastrophic events that will completely disrupt our economy, environment and communities. Now, to stay on a scientifically based trajectory that keeps temperatures within check requires an acceleration of our decarbonisation, and that is a minimum of 75% emissions reduction by 2035.
I mean, it's worth saying that scientifically that stuff about 75% or we're no longer in a livable band, it is not scientific. That is hyperbole and that is not what any serious scientist is suggesting. But sticking up the media elements to this, Sally Sarah, I wonder what she thinks about climate change, because she's giving a lot of airtime to somebody that's basically irrelevant politically.
Well, the Teals got a lot of ABC airtime before and now after as well. And so in this case with Zali Steggall. Now, as you know, and as viewers know, the Teals have no influence in the forthcoming government. Labor's got a massive majority in the House of Representatives, and they have no representatives in the Senate. So in the Senate, the Greens will have some influence, and the Coalition will have influence because they've got numbers there too. But Zali Steggall will have no influence at all. So the idea that she should be put on and get a soft interview talking about climate change and giving warnings about, the end of the world, when in any event Australia produces about 1% of global emissions. But it's what's happened all the time. I understand that a number of former ABC staff have been on the staff of the Teals or revising the Teals. I expect they've got very good contacts into Ultimo and in the Melbourne studios and others, and I think they get their mates on and they get very soft interviews. So Monique Ryan, Zoe Daniel, Zali Steggall and others have had very soft interviews, but they're continuing after the election. Monique Ryan's been on after the election. She'll have no influence either. I mean, the Teals, if they're going to have it, it's unlikely that Labor would go to minority government after the next election. So you're really looking at a period for some of these Teals of 9 years in the Parliament without really having any real impact or any prospect of getting into a cabinet at any time.
And there doesn't appear to be any challenging of the assertions. No. And so, for example, Zali Steggall, she's invoking the Paris Accord, which is basically, it's collapsed in on itself. America's not part of it. China's not part of it. India doesn't care for it. You've got these giant mega emitters who are, collectively the majority of the world's emissions.
Including Russia.
Russia. I mean, do we really think that we're going to morally position Russia to do something? Is Russia going to look at us? And these flaws with this way of thinking, even if Sally Sarah doesn't agree with it, I would like those assertions put to her, because if we're going to sacrifice our economic freedoms and our livability to do something that ultimately has no impact globally because no one else is doing it, right? Yeah. That should be put to them, and they don't do it. They let them just talk.
Well, overwhelmingly, the Teals get soft questions. I can't remember one ABC interview in the last 3 years where the Teals have been really challenged. They're always soft because it's basically their mates talking to their mates. That's essentially what it is, and within the ABC as a conservative free zone. I mean, people like Zali Steggall. People like Sally Sarah, they're never challenged within the ABC either, because everyone essentially in the ABC agrees with everyone else, and those who don't have the courage to say it either publicly or privately. I mean, I know people in the ABC have got certain views, but they will never express them within the public, on the public platform or within the ABC.
For the viewers, it also makes it boring and dull because, the contest of ideas, it's great. It's great to have a bit of argy-bargy in a debate. But look, let's move on now because ABC 7:30, you found a great clip of this so-called Liberal Party historian. Let's have a listen.
Liberal Party historian Judith Brett says history doesn't make her optimistic that the party can overcome its divisions.
Well, look, I wouldn't be very confident at all. But I guess we have to give them the benefit of the doubt at this stage. And the seriousness of the loss should surely be a wake-up call that they have to move back to the centre because, as people say again and again, the centre is where Australian elections are won and lost, and they've clearly drifted too far to the right.
Now, when we say historian, it kind of, you would think that the way that Laura Tingle is introducing this woman, that she's maybe former Liberal Party, she loves the party, she studied it, she's across the history. It seems like maybe she doesn't like the Liberal Party and her experience is just documenting things she doesn't like about it.
Well, I've known Judith Brett for a long time. She's a former editor of co-editor of the left-wing magazine Arena. That's a real Marxist magazine in those days. She first, on here on 7:30 the other day, she said the Liberal Party is in dire straits. She said the Liberal Party was doomed, and I've documented this in an article she wrote in The Age in 1984, which I guess you wouldn't remember because you wouldn't have been...
6 years before I was born.
You wouldn't have
She's been
born.
talking about this stuff.
So you say it in 1984, you say it again in 2025, and she did write a book on Robert Menzies. It was called Robert Menzies, The Forgotten People. And people who didn't read it thought it was very sympathetic to Menzies. But I read it cover to cover, and it wasn't sympathetic to Menzies. It's highly critical of Menzies. So she sort of gets away as someone who's written a book on that, and she does some good academic work from time to time, but she's not a Liberal Party historian.
It's the wrong way.
And I don't mind her being on the program, but there should have been someone else with a different view who was a Conservative challenging that view. But she got 4 slots, and no one got any slots.
Yeah, and very quickly on John Lyons.
Well, he's back in Washington translating the Trump administration, and he reported the other day from Washington about what Trump had said in Saudi Arabia, and you could have done that from Ultimo or Melbourne or anywhere else. You didn't really need to be there. So,
was it a very salient intellectual kind of analysis?
No, it wasn't. I mean, anyone could have pretty well done it. It went for 2 minutes without a stop, just a monologue. And he ends up saying that Trump's got a plan for the world. Well, I'm glad
it's translated for me because I wouldn't know what to think otherwise.
No, you wouldn't have a clue. Nor would I. Nor would the viewers.
Gerard Henderson, thank you so much as always.
Pleasure.